a few years ago when I was starting my property management company, I was looking all over Richmond, all over Central Virginia for the people that I absolutely need to know. And there's this name that kept coming up. And I heard all kinds of nicknames associated with this name. And this name that kept coming up was Jim Ingersoll. And the name sounded larger than life. I was like, all right, what is up with this guy? Why is everyone talking about Jim Ingersoll? And so, a little Google search here and there, searches online, and you go and see that there's books with Jim Ingersoll. There are tons of videos and content. There are online followings in the hundreds of thousands that Jim Ingersoll is hosting. There are national meetup groups with Jim Ingersoll. And then there's all this branding around Jim. And you start thinking like, okay, one, I'm never going to meet this guy. He's one of the gurus that, everyone talks about. He's famous, has this huge following. Two, he's going to be a jerk. Like, he's not going to treat people he's already made it. He's good. He's got his own. And I didn't quite understand that the Jim Ingersoll was even in Virginia. Was this larger than life name had to be somewhere else, was not anywhere close to me. And then I hear about this deal maker conference in Richmond. And this was late 2019 when I started hearing about this. And I was like, all right, well, how do I get in front of Jim? How do I just get to talk to him and just somehow get him in my network, because he seems like a really good person to know, because now I'm understanding he is in Richmond, and I'm hearing more about Jim that he's one of the world's nicest guys. He's most humble. He's done incredible work. He's impacting the community, and everything that you think about people that have made it built a network that big doesn't necessarily have to be true. There are role models out there, and there are examples out there, people that are followed and are loved for a reason, because they're great people, not just because they have tons of investments or they've been very successful or have wealth or anything like that. It's because they're just good people, and they built such a strong network around them. And that's what I started to hear about Jim as I got closer to his inner circle. And so when this Dealmaker group came up, I was able to, my way in the door, instead of just buying a ticket, was how can I add value? I realized like the best way for me to meet people is try to add value. So instead of just buying a ticket, I wanted to see if I could sponsor the event, or at least be a sponsor of the event. And so I was like, maybe that'll get his attention a little bit. It'll certainly open up a line of communication to be able to speak with him if I sponsor his event. And so there was a Dealmaker event in Richmond early 2020, right before the pandemic. Thankfully, that worked out successfully. I sponsored the event for Peak Property Management and showed up and was able to meet Jim Ingersoll. And at that point, we had shared a few email conversations. I'd heard a lot more about Jim. And when I met him at the conference, I was able to confirm everything I'd heard from his inner circle. Just an incredible person, great mindset, super nice, humble. You would not know he was the host. He was the leader. He was the quote unquote godfather of that community. And so it was incredible to meet him. And years later, I think we formed a great relationship. He's got strong relationships with my father. He's traveled the world with my father as well. And he's just been a close friend of our family. And I'm very fortunate to have Jim on the Virginia Investor Podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Stephen, oh my gosh, you are way too kind. You know what an honor it is to sit here in this awesome podcast studio with you today? I mean, I'm thinking back to like how quickly you grew Peak. And I got to have like a little bit of a glimpse behind that curtain as it went. And it was just like this, to the moon, so fast. So congrats on all of that. And your dad, I mean, Chuck's just a dear friend of mine, as you know. And you need to have him on the podcast, because his story also goes back to Dealmaker. But now look, like I get to travel the world with him and on these humanitarian adventures with Share the Love, giving away wheelchairs. I love that.
On behalf of my father, thank you for having this network and what you created. The honor is all mine for having you here. My father likely will be on the podcast, but at 70-something years old, getting into real estate and then having a group that fully supports that and helped him get to where he is now as a lender. It's just incredible. So thank you for that. I'm excited to dig into some of your life experiences and kind of what made you who you are today. And of course, a lot about real estate investing. You have an interesting story, of course, because you don't get to where you are without an interesting story. You're different. You've taken different actions. You probably think different than most people. I would love to get a snapshot of your childhood growing up to your first deal. Like what created Jim Ingersoll up to his first deal? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'm from Jamestown, New York. It's a small town south of Buffalo in snow country. And I lived there till 1998 when I came to Richmond. But, growing up, I'm so thankful I had great parents. And my dad taught me so much about working hard and taking care of other people. A lot of that came from him, taking care of your neighbors and things like that. But my dad worked at an architectural firm, but he began buying some rental property. And he bought a duplex in Jamestown, and then he bought like a triplex. And he just had these sort of landlord experiences that made it look pretty easy. So Cheryl was my next door neighbor, and I married her in 1987. And my dad helped us buy our first house. He helped support with the down payment. It was a $19,000 house. I just drove by it last week, Stephen,
Awesome.
when I was in Jamestown, and it's a hot mess. You don't get a lot for 19 grand. So I remember my mortgage payment was $229 a month, and there were months that I struggled making that payment.
Wow.
Back in the 1990 range. And so he made it look so easy. Cheryl and I talked about it, and we said, why don't we buy a property? And I went out and found a $20,000 duplex, and that didn't go well. So my dad made it look easy.
So let's
and it didn't go good.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So
Okay.
I was going to say, you bought this, you get this first deal. First, how did you fund that duplex? Because I would assume if you have a first house, you're not some big investor.
No, I had no money.
Very little liquidity at that
broke.
time. How did you fund that first deal?
I don't remember how I paid for the down payment. I may have taken I may have charged on my credit card the down payment.
Got it.
But it was like 20 grand. I mean, what could go wrong, Stephen?
Right,
$10,000 a door.
Yeah,
what could possibly happen? Right?
Speaking about your risk, what was your risk at that point? Like, did you just say, well, I don't own anything anyway. If this goes wrong, I'll just go bankrupt and start over. Like, there's very little to lose. Or was that risk factor, like, did you even consider the risk at that point?
I didn't even think about it as risk. I mean, it's the price of a car. I mean, really, right?
Right.
So, and Dad made it look so easy. So what could possibly go wrong? I was working full-time as an engineer, but the problem is I had no training, no network, no systems, no processes.
Right.
And when you're working full-time and you're trying to be a DIY landlord, a lot can go wrong really quick.
So you buy this first house and you're like, all right, I've made it. I'm now a real estate investor.
Yeah.
I have a duplex. And then I kind of had this note where it's like, okay, and the rest is history. And now you have this awesome investment. You've done all these things. You built this great network. I want to hear about that first investment, because I think a lot of people are worried about what could go wrong, and then something goes wrong and they stop forever, and that's the end of the road, right? And they miss out on this great opportunity. What went wrong on that first investment?
Everything.
Was it more tenant focused, maintenance focused,
Yeah,
just all across the board?
Tenant and maintenance, both. Those are always the hot buttons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was working full-time as an engineer at a place called AccuRite, and if somebody would call me to rent it from the newspaper back then, it was before the internet, believe it or not,
Mm-hmm.
and they would call me from the newspaper, and I would meet them after work, and if they wanted it, they had a pulse and at least a partial deposit at least, they got moved right in. I didn't have an application.
Right.
I didn't have credit screening, like no screening. I don't even know what I use for a lease. And what could go wrong? Everything.
Right.
Like non-payment, the house gets damaged. By the way, when you buy a duplex that cheap, there's a lot of deferred maintenance.
Right.
And I did like a conventional loan of some sort with no rehab funding.
Right.
And,
So it just stayed deferred, and then
Well,
you had to figure it out as you went.
yeah.
Like when the tenants absolutely needed something, some health safety issues, you had to figure out how to come up with the money, which I'm guessing was a credit card or something like that, or were you able to borrow money? Or
Well, I remember specifically when the heat went in the downstairs apartment, which was a 3-bedroom apartment. It was rented to a nice family at that point for that one. But the heat went out, and I didn't have money to pay somebody to come fix the boiler. I went to the Chautauqua Mall in our area, and I went to Walden Bookstore and bought a handyman book. And in the handyman book, I've read about how to fix a boiler. And I don't think I could do it today, but somehow I at least got the heat working.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs, if they knew what they were going to get into, if they could see the next 10, 20 years down the road, they probably wouldn't do it, because they would see how hard it is and how, but there are a certain type of people that just take action, and then they're willing to take more action and willing to figure things out. And you were willing, like you took a significant action, and then there was an issue, you couldn't afford it, but you knew you had to do the right thing, and you knew you had to solve the problem, and you found a way to solve it.
Yeah, and I remember there was like a state grant for doing repairs and improvements as well, and we got that, and I learned to put vinyl siding on a house with that one.
Awesome.
All the repairs in the upstairs apartment, I either figured out how to do them myself or my dad helped me.
So are you happy at this point once you're sort of making repairs and things like that, or was it an exit that you had to get out of? What did that look like?
Well, the exit came when I took a job transfer to Virginia.
Okay.
And I didn't want to be managing a property in a different state I wasn't good at it anyways. So we had to sell it. I was a bit of a motivated seller at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I sold it to my handyman on a land contract, set up with a refi the next day. So it was a very short-term land contract. He refied me. I didn't lose money, believe it or not. And later on, I went back to my hometown to look for the house, and it had burned down.
Oh, wow.
So it went up in smoke.
Wow. That's incredible. So you had this experience, you bought your duplex. It gave you some good learning lessons on what to do, what not to do, how to solve some problems. And then you got relocated to Virginia, thankfully, because that just made Richmond so much better.
At that point, Cheryl said, why don't you stick with this corporate America thing for
Right.
a while? I was doing well in corporate America. They
Right.
kept getting promoted, job transfer, all that stuff. And she's like, it's a lot less risky. I don't ever want to be a landlord again. That's what she told me.
Right.
That cost me 10 years of investing.
So for 10 years, you were an engineer,
Yeah.
doing well, like living
Corporate America.
Corporate America life. What in the world made you want to go back to investing?
Well, corporate America was fine, but my first job back in Richmond, they told me I was going to travel 30%. And then all of a sudden, I was traveling constantly, international. So like when we moved here, I was in China at one point, and then I came back, and the moving truck from New York to Virginia was going to come while I was in England at that point. And I thought, man, this thing is way overrated. I'm like a corporate slave now.
Right.
I mean, I don't have any control over my schedule. When they say travel, like go open a factory or whatever it was, like you go, like you don't have a choice. And it was really hard on Cheryl. And so that company shut down, went down to 30 people here in Richmond from 2,200 to 30. And I made that cut. And then they asked me to transfer to St. Louis, and I'm like, no, I'm out. So I took my out, got another job running a couple of factories, one in Richmond and one in North Carolina. And that was good for a while until corporate went out on that one, and I had to lay every single employee off.
Wow.
And I thought, this sucks.
Right.
And I'm done. Like, that's when I talked to Cheryl, and I'm like, we gotta find something else.
What was that conversation like? Because I know there are several in the past few years, folks that have come up to me and said, I'm very interested in investing in real estate, but I'm not sure my spouse is on board. And in fact, I know people that would be very, very good at it. They have all the skill sets that it looks like you need to invest in real estate. They have the ambition, the drive, but they have a spouse, whether it be the husband or the wife, that just doesn't want to take the risk, isn't comfortable with it. Now, you had a little bit going for you when Cheryl was not happy because she doesn't have her gym, right? And she knows that there needs to be a change. But there's a lot of other things outside of landlording that you could have done. What was that conversation like to get on the same page as far as landlording?
I think we bought a house in the West End, and then I bought one in Churchill, and she went along with that. It's on Chimborazo Boulevard. It was a little bit tough rehabbing back then. I didn't have a team or any real experience then either, but I started getting around people that made me believe that I could do it. And Cheryl was actually really supportive. I either had to move out of the area or find something here I could do on my own. I just needed to get my income replaced reasonably quick, and it was good income. And then I started trying to do wholesaling, and I was really struggling for like 3 months. Like I would find a house, have no buyers, find some buyers, have no house. I was nervous about signing a contract, didn't know how title worked. I didn't know how closings worked. And all of a sudden, I was driving in Petersburg, Virginia, and there was a for rent sign in a dumpy little crappy house that they had high grass. And I'm like, what is he doing trying to rent this piece of garbage? You know what I mean? So I called him up. His name was Bob Sykes. We're still in contact all these years later, 15 years later, 20 years. And Bob's like, I've got a package of houses, but there's I'm in pre-foreclosure on some.
Okay.
And I said, well, how about if we write up a contract? Why don't we start with 5 of them? So we wrote up a contract that day for 5 houses. I put them onto Craigslist back then. And all of a sudden, I started building a buyer's list. I moved those 5 houses pretty quick. Everything synced. And the next year, I wholesaled 100 houses.
You mentioned one thing that I think is very important. You put yourself around people that believe you can do it.
That's the key.
How did you find those people, and who were those people back then?
Well, let me tell you, I really mentioned Cheryl a lot. I've been happily married for 38 years. I mean, that helps a lot. But I got invited to an event in Florida. It was in Tampa, and it was with Jack Miller. And Jack was one of the guys who was really monumental to my life early on. Like, my heart said go, but our checkbook together said don't do this. And Cheryl said, let's go for it. Incredible. And so she was the first one who really believed and said, let's go. And we went together. And I think it's important if you can bring your spouse to an event like Dealmaker, they'll understand because they'll see hundreds of other people that are already doing this.
Right.
And you'll find a network that does believe in you. And that was the key. So that's where I began finding other people that were already where I wanted to go. And they were willing to help me. They were willing to reach down, grab my hand, and help me out of the mud and get unstuck and start to do some deals and create deal flow. And they were doing it all over the country. And
they had an abundance mindset to where they don't see you as a competitor.
Right.
They see you as someone who perhaps you can do deals together. If they help you learn, it's going to help strengthen them. There's so many things about finding a network like that.
Right.
One of the interesting things that I want to point out is you were willing to go to Florida to find these people.
Right.
And I hear people in Richmond with people that you just described that you found in Florida are all over the place in Richmond, and you've created a community of them called Deal Makers.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's several groups. There's an inner circle. There's all kinds of things, but and we'll get into those a little bit later. But you've created a community of those people that want other people to win and will help other people win. And it's right here in Virginia, and people don't have to go to Florida or don't have to go to different states. They could if they wanted, because now there's groups like that in different states, but you were willing to go to Florida, to some degree had to go to Florida at the time to find a really solid network to help you get started. So then you brought that back to Richmond and you started doing some deals. What do you think made the difference between, of course you got your start with that one investor and package of houses. What was the escalation? How did you get from, a single digits in deals or so to 100 the next year?
Well, a lot of it, you said, is mindset. Like, you've really got to at some point believe you're going to be able to do this. And so I started building a buyer's list, and I found out there are a lot of people looking to buy investment properties. Thank God for Petersburg.
Right.
A lot of distressed inventory, really cheap, and a lot of motivated sellers back then.
Right.
And so, you just started putting pieces together. You start figuring out marketing. And I'd get my kids were in middle school back then, and they would help me with my postcards. They would do the label and the stamp. And then I taught my mother-in-law, Judy, how to do yellow letters later on. And she loved handwriting on these things.
Right.
Like legitimately, like she wrote thousands of letters. And I started doing direct mail, and that really opened up a lot. Started doing bandit signs, but not just one or two. Like I'd put them all over the city.
Right.
And somebody would call me in Petersburg from a bandit sign. I'd be like, where did you see my bandit sign? They're like, I saw 3 or 4 of them, not just one. And then they called.
More or less employed some family members. Did you have a team outside of that?
No.
Okay. And then, so you're scaling to close to 100 wholesale deals a year, which is incredible. There was a shift to where you started buying rentals and things like that. I would like to kind of jump ahead and then unpack some of it, because I think if we focused on all of the deals in your entire journey, we wouldn't have enough time. We would be here for about a week, and I don't think we would get to your true mindset and the value of what you bring and kind of what goes on in your head. So, but I do want to kind of let somebody who's listening understand the capacity or of what you've done. And so I would never sit here and ask how many houses you own or anything like that, but maybe a good way of looking at it is if you have any idea, how many real estate transactions do you think you've done in the past 20 years? Is there any way of knowing or coming close?
No, not really, but I would say it's around 1,000, I would say.
Right. So, and that's what I had in my head, like somewhere around 1,000 deals. And some of those are wholesale deals, some of those are flips, and some of those are rentals, and there's all these different things. The moral of the story is this vastly increases in size and scale, and there's a lot of lessons over the years, and I kind of want to walk through some of those lessons. Looking back, is there a single mindset shift or belief that you had that caused you to be what I'll call, no disrespect, from an average investor to what I would call a world-class investor with what you've done? What do you think that mindset shift was, and when did it happen, and how?
I think it started to begin when the market crashed. Think back 20 years ago. We were in 2004, 5, right? What happened in like 2006 and 7? The market crashed. So I was wholesaling in high volume 2 years in a row. I wholesaled over 100 houses. And then all of a sudden, all the hard money lenders started going out of business, really. And the market shifted radically, really fast. And those were some tough times. And again, you got to be around the right groups of people to make it through. I remember journaling, Stephen, where I wrote in my journal, I'm up against a huge obstacle that's like a giant wall. I'm not sure what to do, but I'm either going to go over that wall or I'm going to pound my way through it today. Mm-hmm. And that you need that mindset. Most of the investors today, like the current generation of investors, have not been through a shift like that. Many of my friends who were investing then went out, like they went back to corporate America. But somehow, like through that mindset shift back then, you've got to be willing to do whatever it is you've got to do. So I had to shift pretty quickly out of wholesaling. And I remember I told Cheryl, I said, I'm not sure how we're going to get through all this, but I will commit to getting up at 5 a.m. every day for as long as this takes.
Awesome.
7 days a week until everything's stable for our family. And that's what I did. I got up at like 5 a.m. for weeks and months probably on end. But you make it through, and you keep getting around people, and you keep getting better, and you pivot. You got to learn to pivot. That
is incredibly important. Everything about what you just said is so important, and there's probably 3 or 4 takeaways from those statements. A lot of people want the same result but don't want to put in the work, and they don't see or feel or understand or have that emotional connection to what it takes to get what you have or what you've created. You've also faced challenges that are phenomenal challenges, and you pivoted. You didn't quit. You didn't back out. You didn't rationalize. You didn't make excuses. As the market shifts, because you've experienced a large one, how do you decide to pivot versus doubling down on what you're doing or quitting? Like why? Because again, that's different than most people, I would argue, would say, hey, it was fun while it lasted. I made some good money on wholesaling. Now let's find the next thing. Do you have any advice on how to pivot, or know when to pivot, know when to double down, or know when to quit?
Yeah, it's hard to do, but I can tell you this. Part of my mindset shift was I realized that wholesaling was transactional.
Okay.
Like same thing with being a realtor and having commission. Same thing with flipping houses. It's all very transactional. So what you've got is like a treadmill business.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you're on that treadmill and you can make it all work, it's fine. But as soon as you want to get off that treadmill, you can't because the income stops.
Right.
That's the beauty of getting into long-term wealth building. Because like you got to think longer term. I always say like wholesalers think in days and weeks. Like they want that quick assignment. Right. Flippers are thinking in months. Landlords are thinking in years or decades.
That's a wonderful way to put it. There's the common saying of like, if you start a business and it remains small, you just give yourself a job. If you're wholesaling, right, you have a job. If you're looking more towards passive income like rentals or private lending or something like that, you still you're always going to have a job to some capacity, but it could be far less. You have much more time freedom. So you've built wealth using many different revenue sources or revenue streams, wholesaling, but building a rental portfolio of single family, multifamily. I would guess some commercial property as well. You flipped property and you participate in private lending. What strategy do you believe creates the greatest long-term wealth and why?
There is no doubt in my mind. It's building a rental portfolio. So you got to think long-term, but you got to get at it today because it takes a while. But over a period of time, everything changes.
Do you think that beginners should focus on one? Because the long-term wealth is a goal. What if I'm just beginning? And I know there's various circumstances to that, how much capital do I have and,
right,
and what my network is and things like
right,
that. If I'm just beginning with $10,000 and I want to build long-term wealth, which equals, buy and hold, real estate investing, et cetera, what is my first move? What first one or two moves with $10,000?
Well, you might want to flip and keep your $10,000 and add to it.
So walk me through how that would work. If I want to keep my $10,000, okay, how do I do that first deal? How do I set that up?
Well, find a motivated seller. That's where every great deal begins. It might not be on the MLS. It could be through a wholesaler, but there's far less wholesalers than there used to be.
Right.
And far less good ones, by the way. Find something off the MLS where the realtor may have a pocket listing or off the MLS or foreclosure or a motivated seller or a deal from a wholesaler, whatever it takes. Like I think if I challenge everybody to focus 1 hour a day with no distractions, study your market, analyze deals, and make one offer a day, you will get there. You will find that deal. And then from there, all you need is the money. And you got to have the mindset that all the money is already printed. It's already got your name on it. Both of us, Stephen, like we got to have that mindset. Like if I want to buy something like this office building I'm in today, self-storage, a duplex, a single family, you've got to have the mindset that that money is there and it's available for a good deal, and it is. It's always there, but the key is a good deal. So you got to find that good deal, connect with a private money lender or a hard money lender, and then get them to fund all of the money that you need for both the purchase and the rehab, and then get it done, flip it, and then you've got a little bit of a nest egg, a little bit of capital reserves that you can go out and try to buy a rental.
What's the worst case scenario that deal goes bad?
The worst case scenario? Well, if you buy the deal right, you shouldn't lose money. But let's say you didn't stress test your deal. I like using AI. You and I have talked about this a little. But you can go to ChatGPT and put the parameters of your deal in there and ask ChatGPT to help you stress test the deal. Here's what you can do. You can say, like, I'm buying this house for $140,000. It needs $50,000 in repair, and it should ARV at $300 after repair value. But what if that deal takes $20,000 more in rehab, and it takes 8 months to sell instead of 4 months? What does that do to my margin? And it'll tell you. So I do think it's important to stress test your deals.
Right. That's incredible use of AI. And I know other people are using AI for like design work and things like that. There's so many things we can use it for. There's probably a handful of people that would listen to this that have analysis paralysis, right? And so they can use AI for these deals. They can, let's say they have $10,000 or $1 million. Even I've met surgeons with analysis paralysis. They were like, hey, I got, $1 million in the bank, but I'm scared to buy this house, right? And I think like most of the people that I know got started with almost no liquidity, and they just
me.
figured out how to make those deals work and then gain liquidity and stuff like that. What's the first action someone with analysis paralysis takes?
Well, a lot of people in my classification of corporate America have it because we're engineers. An engineer is a classic analysis of paralysis because you're used to having an equation controlling the variables to get the desired output. And if you do that with every single deal that you look at, you're going to spend too long looking at it and somebody else will scoop it up. Somebody like me.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So you've got to be able to quickly analyze a deal, and you've got to be ready to take action 100%.
Right. And you think, I was talking to another investor in the previous episode where he had done just a few deals and then went out there and raised $15 million for his next deal and in a few single family deals.
Right.
And then did like a 4,000 square foot building. And then his next move was a 111,000 square foot warehouse in Petersburg that was falling apart and raised $15 million to renovate it. And it's crazy to me that like you have that side of the spectrum and then you have the other side of the spectrum where that person, and he didn't have any liquidity or anything. Right. He just got the right group of people together. Where you have the other side of the spectrum where whether you have $1 million or $10 million, there are people that just won't take that first step. And I think people need to be honest with themselves. Is that them? Have they been going to Dealmaker for 3 years and they still haven't found their first deal? It's everywhere. It's all around them. There just needs to be some action taken. Speaking of analyzing deals, what are a few things that you look for before running numbers on a deal? Are there any things that stand out to you when someone brings a deal comes across your desk, and before you even see the numbers, is there things that go through your head that you want to look out for?
Well, first of all, if you want to run your numbers, I recommend you use Rehab Valuator. Daniel Clayman's done an amazing job. By the way, I met Daniel on a bus tour when I was wholesaling, Duke Dotson as well. So like I go way back with some of these guys. It's amazing when I think about the journey. And so he's got a great product. Pick it up, Rehab Valuator. It's amazing. But when I'm looking, I do think it's important you have an investment criteria. Some people call this a buy box today. Mm-hmm. Like figure out what you're looking for and then only analyze the deals that fit that box. So it's going to be different for a single family flip versus a duplex you want to keep as a rental. But you've got to always invest with the end in mind. I think it's really important to do that. So if you're going to try to do BRRRR in today's environment with rates at 7%, like you've got to invest with the end in mind. And the end in mind when you're trying to buy a rental right now is how do I get into permanent financing with as little capital of my own money as possible, for me at least. Now there's great cash flow markets around the country, Indiana, Mississippi, different places of Ohio and such. But here in Virginia, our markets are high. The prices are up. Rents are up as well, but rates are around 7%.
Right.
So invest with that end in mind. Get a really strong, tight buy box, and only look at the deals that hit that buy box focus.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said borrow money, right? Like if you can use other people's capital, and right. I think a lot of people think, well, that's super risky. I would argue that you can borrow $100,000 of someone else. They have the collateral on the asset, and they've analyzed that asset to see if everything goes wrong, they can sell that asset and get their money back. So they're protected, but they've underwritten that deal and they're protected. If you put your $100,000 into that house, like you've underwritten that deal, and perhaps if something goes wrong, it's likely you're funding the rehab. And so I would argue that that's way more risky putting your own money into it than borrowing money. And there's money everywhere. There's money all over the place. Yes. And so if you could find money, borrow money, use other people's money to get into these deals, they have the collateral to become whole. And then I think that's a great way to scale without using your own capital. And you can use your own cushion and capital as fallback if something bad happens or goes south.
If you try to use your own money all the time, you're not going to scale.
Correct.
You're just not, especially for me. I mean, I started with almost nothing coming out of corporate America, really. So I think it's a really big goal to learn how to invest with using other people's money and leveraging that. We call it OPM. OPI is another one, other people's IRAs. Whatever it is, it's really important. There's people that would love to participate in people's deals. I love doing private money lending. So does your dad. Like it is great returns, and you get to participate in other people's deal flow, which is amazing. But I think that was one of the big mindset shifts I made from like wholesaling to flipping and buying and holding is I learned to use other people's money and realize I don't have to do this all on my own. I don't even need a 20% down payment for a bank. Like I can find a good deal and the equity in that deal is my down payment.
Right.
And then from there, I can either flip it or I can fix it up really nice and rent it and have Peak manage it for me if I want, and then refi it.
When I got into real estate, I built my team first, and one of the people on the team was a private lender, and I had fortunately impressed him. He actually, we had a meeting when I was still learning, and it was the only meeting in my entire life that ended early because it wasn't going well. And he ended the meeting and basically said, hey, look, you don't know anything what I'm saying, right? Like, you don't know any of these terms. I was like, correct. You're speaking Chinese. I just don't understand it. And he said, all right, well, it's been great talking to you. We'll talk some other time. And I really just wanted to get to know him as an investor, but because of my network, I was introduced to someone who'd been investing for 50 years, and he was he was like a president of a bank, and he was an FBI interrogator in a former life, and like and so I'm sitting across from this guy, and he's using all these terms, and he's staring me directly in the eyes, and I just don't know what he's saying, and he can see it, right? And so I actually learned a valuable lessons. Hey, I need to get up to speed on some of this stuff. And so I left, and about 6 months later, after a lot of studying and a lot of work, I felt good enough to meet with him again. So he didn't ask to meet. I didn't think I'd ever talk to him again, but I needed to go back and redeem myself. And so I went back and said, hey, I in our first meeting, I didn't know a lot of what you're saying, but I did remember you said you were a private lender. I'm ready to start investing. Do you want to meet up? And fortunately, he took the meeting, and I showed him that I knew what I was saying, and I knew the terms, I knew the strategy, and I knew the financing behind it. I told him my outlay. I was going to do the Burr method. I was going to do all this stuff, and he said, "I really like what you're saying. I have $1 million in a pot, and it's yours. Go buy some houses." And that was at the end of a one. So at the beginning of the meeting, I had liquidity of a few $1,000s, right? At the end of the meeting, I had liquidity of $1 million. And so I went out and we bought like somewhere between 12 and 14 houses the first year. And he was the lender, and I burred the sometimes 3 at a time and held them all as rentals. And I eventually like learned a lesson. Okay, let's sell 2 of them, get some capital. But I made almost 6 figures on both of those sales. And so like you buy them right and then have the right strategy. And so it was incredible to use that money, and that taught me how quick you could scale. Whereas if it were my own money, I would still be looking for maybe like my 5th house right now or something like that. What's a deal that you walked away from that other people said was a sure thing? Was anyone who comes to you, oh, well, you're a lender, people come to you all the time and say, hey, lend on this. And you're probably like, no, I don't like that deal. But were there any that like people were all in on that was a great deal that they wanted to pull you in on, and you were able to identify that maybe it's not the best deal and you wanted to stay out of it?
Well, a lot of that might be fund related, like syndications and things like that, which I've avoided, which I'm really happy that I have. Like the key is the operator. You're really betting on the jockey, not the horse in that case. I mean, I had calls this morning, Stephen, on 2 different people that are struggling on syndications right now with the returns that are not coming in as projected. Right. So I'm glad that I have a lot of people and a lot of friends that have done really well syndicating. I'm really glad I've never done it personally and that I've never invested in somebody else's.
Is it because you're not in control? You can't control the asset and you're not sure what decisions that operator is going to make?
Yeah, and then like rates went up, it got a little more difficult. I'm not saying I'll never syndicate myself or invest in somebody else's fund, but if I can build my own thing, my own portfolio, then I'm going to do it that way.
I think most people are capable of building their own portfolio. The easy button is giving money to a syndicator, I think. And I think a lot of people, and I'll tell you, I know some very good GPs that run syndications and do very well. So I'm not hating on it by any means. But I do know that the presentations look very fancy. The returns look very good. And it's like, hey, if you just give me $100,000 now, you could skip all this work over here and get similar returns. You don't have to do anything. But the problem is there's a lot more that goes into it. Like you're out of control. You're not making the decisions. You're on that other person's game plan. You might have 3 or 4 or 2 or 4 or 3 or 5 GPs in the deal that may have different interests or just different ways of thinking how they want to control that asset. So it's very important if you get into a GP or if you get into a syndication to really understand that you are not the operator unless you're the GP.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. There's a few operators I feel really good with that I have not invested with. Maybe I will someday. We'll see.
Right. But I have some good friends that do it, and they seem to be very successful at it.
Right.
We talk often about the deals that they're investing in, and maybe someday it would be interesting. But right now, I really like putting my money to work and seeing what decisions I can make and use my creativity to see what comes out of that. And then maybe someday, if I get a little bit more like I'm tired, then give it to these other guys and see what they can do with it.
Now, I will say, like, even on my own deals, I've woken up in the middle of the night and realized I missed something, didn't think of something. I don't know if it's a God moment, exactly what it is, but that happens frequently. And I look back at some of those deals that I avoided, and I'm really thankful that I didn't do the deal. That isn't somebody else's deal. That might be my own deal. And Cheryl's realized that when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I had this thought. She's like, just don't do that deal.
Right. And there's a gut, like, instinct that you start to develop. Like, I can go to a house that the numbers may be okay. Maybe I haven't run them all the way through, but it's easy to get to that house and take a look at it, where I walk the house and it just doesn't feel right. It feels like maybe it's too much work that I don't want to take on right now. There's something that doesn't feel right about the lot, the land, the bones of the house. Like, I've walked through a number of houses where I'm like, I'm not really interested in even running the numbers. It just doesn't feel like it's the deal that I need to do. And then I've walked in other houses where I need to make sure it's not my emotions or not my eagerness or excitement or something like that, where I've walked in and said, absolutely, I'm going to make a ton of money on this house. I need to buy this house. How do you separate emotions from your decisions?
I am not emotional. I don't get emotionally tied at all.
Engineer.
At all. It must be engineer. Cheryl, on the other hand, sometimes will. So I've really got to watch that if she's with me. Yes.
Right.
But the most recent one I did was on a commercial property, and I was going to get seller financing. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? But I woke up in the night, and I was going to sign the contract the next day, and I backed out. I didn't sign the contract. And I look back, and I'm glad I didn't do it.
What do you attribute to waking up in the middle of the night?
I think it's these little glimpses of wisdom that come from God. It isn't me. I pray for wisdom and discernment, and I think sometimes it comes to me in the middle of the night.
You are a man of faith, and you're open about that, and that's incredible. How has religion or faith shaped your businesses, relationships, success?
All of it.
Everything.
100%.
Talk to me about some of this.
I came into this mindset about, probably 4 or 5 years ago, probably about the time you came to Dealmaker. I had this thought on the way. So many of these events, Stephen, are so focused on greed and ego. They just are, and I hate that about real estate events. And I was driving to the first day of Dealmaker from my house to open, and I had this thought, like, I really don't want this to be about greed and ego. Mm-hmm. It's about collaboration, not ego. It's about getting rid of competition and just helping people.
Right.
And I had this thought that everything I do and everything that I own really isn't mine. None of it is mine. It's all God's. And if I focus it there, the houses that I own, the tenants that I have, the contractors I work with, all of it's just originated with God. And really, it's all His asset. I'm just here to manage it. And I had this mindset shift, like, man, if I'm going to work for God, I've got to do this with excellence as much as I can.
Right.
And it really shifted my mind, like, because it isn't about greed and egos and all this stuff. It's all God's, and I have the privilege of participating in some of it. So I got a lot more bold about it in the last 4 or 5 years, for sure.
Right. Definitely since we've known each other, you've been very open and vocal about it.
I used to be nervous about talking about it, but I'm not anymore.
Yeah, there's no reason to be, or at least in my opinion. Maybe in some markets or some territories it might be, but
no, it's all God's.
How do you balance? Look, I'm not someone who thinks that being ambitious or successful is greed or anything, because I focus on the accomplishment. I feel like if I can accomplish more, I can help more people, I can make a bigger impact. Is that similar? How do you look at it?
Yeah, I think so. I think you come to a point where you're not really just doing it for yourself. Part of your why is living a life of significance, of being able to help a lot of other people. There's people way wealthier than me that are helping a lot more people than I'll ever be able to help. So I don't look at them as being greedy either. I mean, they're doing a lot of things behind closed doors I don't even know about. But I think if you have the mindset that you're going to do well, just think long term, take action today, think long term. Everything else is going to work out if you help enough other people get what they need. Zig Ziglar said that, and I live by it. I think it's really important. So success is important, but living with significance is more important.
I think that was one of the things that struck me the most when I attended the first Dealmaker, and I've attended several since then, was I genuinely thought I was going to walk into a room with all kinds of people talking about the millions of dollars that they have and all, well, I own 100, well, I have 101, well, I have, you know, I would go as far to say that no one, no conversation that I had to do with how many houses they owned, or unless they were saying, I need help. You know, I've got my first house. I need help. How can we work together? Something like that. But nothing from an egocentric standpoint. We talk about, what's your quote on net worth?
It's your network is your net worth.
There you go. So like the reference to net worth was build a network and help other people and have that abundance mindset. And so the entire conference, and then what later to be your entire network and community and the Dealmaker community and all these, the Inner Circle community and basically everything affiliated with Jim Ingersoll and the incredible people that you have in your network, because you brought together just insanely smart and competent and talented people that have their own networks where they are from across the nation, but you've brought them to Richmond, in my opinion. That's how I see it, to share with us. And so, but all of these people have that same mindset. They're going to come and share, and they're going to come and they're not going to talk about the millions of dollars or the hundreds of investments that they have, and they're going to talk about how we can work together to win. And it's an incredible environment to be in.
Yeah, I think the core values of like being authentic and things like that, having high integrity, these are really important to me. And the way that it comes across to build that community is critical.
And that's what I want to talk about. Is I need to talk to you about building a community. You are arguably one of the best people that I know at doing this. And I have a great network. I know many other people that have a very strong network and are very successful. But your network is insane. It is, we're talking like you built community groups online to hundreds of thousands at large. And then you have Dealmaker, the Dealmaker community, which is licensed, maybe is the right or wrong term, in various states across the country, because they have come to Dealmaker in Richmond or some other location. It's made a significant impact on them that they wanted to carry that to their town. You have the Inner Circle with Daniel Clayman. There's so many things that you've done to build your network. What is the most powerful way that you found to get in a room of people, bring them together, and leave a lasting impact on them?
You know, I think a lot of it has to do with not focusing on myself. If I just focus on other people, I think when you're networking, one mistake some people make, if you have an ego, is you walk into a room and you say, here am I.
Right.
If you just walk into the room and say, oh, there you are. Your dad's a master at this now, by the way.
Yes.
You know, just genuinely be yourself, be transparent, be genuine, and everything else will work out. But yeah, you've got to create the right mindset, the right culture. Culture is so important. And we've done that pretty intentionally, both in our 3-day events, but now it's happening across the country because we're in 30 cities and we got some Spanish-speaking deal makers, 100% in Spanish, that are popping up. So I'm loving that.
I see your shirt, and that's an awesome shirt.
Nosotros.
Nosotros, and that is that we or us?
We, yeah.
We?
It's in Atlanta, and then we have deal maker in Espanol in Dallas now, and so they're popping up, which I love seeing. Back
onto the real estate. I want one more thing I want to touch. I love creativity and unconventional thinking.
Me too.
Tell me about your most creative deal.
Well, I don't know what my most creative is, but I've done a lot of seller financing. I've seller financed office buildings from doctors, and I think a parking lot once, and multifamily. I've done 8 units, 32 units, and all the way up to 20 in a 20 unit in Florida. You know, I just love those deals because they're built one-on-one with a person. Now, I'll just tell you about the one I did in Florida. It was the first deal I did in Florida. After COVID, I started looking at trends of where people were moving. There was a lot of people moving to Florida after COVID. They were a pretty open state. Now the market's shifted. But back then, things were growing really quick. And I had a call from a realtor who had a pocket listing on 20 units. And the person was highly motivated. They had to sell because they had aging landlord, self-managing horribly, lots of deferred maintenance. Like when you can stack motivations like 4 or 5 deep, you're going to get a good deal. And so he had health issues. He was aging. He had really bad management, a lot of things, and deferred maintenance. So I sat down with him and we made a deal, and we secured that deal at Panera Bread Company over lunch, over like 1 hour. And I'm still a little bit of an introvert, so I don't love these one-on-ones like with him and his wife. At the end of that lunch, we agreed to him selling it to us with owner financing at 5%. And he was also nervous about capital gains, which drove that part of the seller financing. And so it provided him a solution to get here to Virginia, be closer to his family as he gets older and has health issues, and allows him out of that. That's just like one example of something that we were able to put together.
You really inspired me with seller financing. I think it might have been at a Dealmaker event, but you were talking about it and you said, hey, it's a deal between two people.
It is.
And as long as you find the win-win between two people, you can make a deal happen. And so I was going to buy a vacation property a few years ago, and I had heard this message right before that conversation. The seller had the house paid off, had owned it for 40 years. His kids no longer come down there. So he was like, yeah, it's time for me to pass it along, right? And so I sit down with them, and I don't want to use a whole lot of my capital. I'm still trying to build the portfolio and build the business and everything like that. But I really want this property. It's in a perfect location in the Outer Banks. Like we want to get it. And so the conversations that you or a speaker at the Dealmaker event said was, the deal is whatever works between you and the seller, assuming it's within the law and stuff like that. And so I walked up to the seller and basically said, okay, you have here's everything in this bucket that you need out of this deal. Here's everything in this bucket that I need out of this deal. Here's what I've come up with to solve both of those. And the answer was, there's some deferred maintenance that I need to put in the house. So I'm going to defer the first payment for 6 months.
Love that.
And then it's a seasonal house. We plan on renting it some. So there's a seasonal house, and I'd like to only make 2 payments a year for the next 10 years. And the 2 payments will be X amount. It was an amount that I felt comfortable with, that I thought was reasonable, that he would accept. So it was $0 down payment. So then I could put that money into improving the house, which was his collateral. So that helps him have a more valuable collateral that he's holding on to. And then 2 payments a year for 10 years at 0% interest. And I think we ended up moving that a little bit to like 2% interest or whatever the lowest allowable was because of imputed tax. And so that was an interesting deal, but it was that conversation happened right after hearing you or someone at Dealmaker speak.
Amazing. And
I remember running to you afterward and be like, Jim, guess what?
I love bank financing too, but you could never do a deal like that with a bank. Can you imagine walking into, a local regional bank and saying, I want to buy this property, but I don't want to put any money down, no skin in the game, and I don't want to make a payment for X number of months, first one, and then I'm going to make 2 payments a year for 10 years at 2% interest.
Right.
It wouldn't happen.
No, they would laugh. Yeah, they would laugh.
Those are the type of deals that generationally change a family.
Knowing what you know now, if you had to start today in a completely new market and no one knows you, let's say you didn't have any group or network to call on, but you still have the same knowledge and information, what would be your strategy to build generational wealth?
You can't do it alone, so you do need to focus on relationships. That's the key. That's why we say your network becomes your net worth. So I would begin going to local meetups and beginning to also, I think it's a great idea. And then as you go to those meetups, you're going to meet a few people. Start planning to take 2 of them a week out to lunch and buy their lunch.
How do you know what meetups are good or not?
Well, it's hard. You just go, and if it's not good, don't go back. Yeah. You've got to go.
I'm spoiled with meetups around here. Many of them have that abundance mindset. We have this mindset that we've been talking about during this podcast. But in my opinion, if you show up to a meetup and it is about the millions of dollars and
Right.
it is about themselves and it is, now someone's going to share their story, that's fine, but there's a certain way of doing that. And I think if you walk into a meetup and you get that vibe, it's similar to, I used to train jujitsu before I had a shoulder replacement, but when you walk in a gym and the guys are egocentric and all about
Right.
themselves, it's a scary place to be. It's a very scary place. But when you walk in a gym and the black belts are like, hey, how can we help? Welcome to the
Right.
gym.
What a difference.
Let's start here. Here's step number 1, and let's get comfortable in this gym. Like when you go into a meetup, it's a scary place to be when everyone has millions of dollars and hundreds of units and everyone's all about themselves. Whereas if you walk in and they're all about that person who just walked in the door and just getting to know that person and seeing how we can help and add value.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like old school RIAs and things out there that are still that way. A little bit of a pitch fest, very egocentric. It's hard to break in, old school cliques. And really that's the mindset shift we're trying to do with Dealmaker Meetup. That's why we got 30 of them operating around the United States now with the same mindset that it's collaboration, not competition. Leave your ego at the door. We're going to focus on epic networking, not just shoving a product down your throat at the back of the room. I think if you find those people, it will open up everything as you go forward.
Are you, at this point in time, more motivated by the chase, the impact, or legacy at this point?
I think I'll take the impact one.
The impact.
I mean, I will always chase a deal, and legacy is really important to me. Legacy is so much more than just money.
Right.
Like I gotta, my kids to be honest, high integrity, hardworking, all those things. But the impact is really important as well.
What are you going for at impact? Like, what do you have any specific thing, like a vision in mind where you could say, I want my impact to be this, or are you just going to continue to get after it and see how many people you can touch?
Well, I'm super active in my local church. We go to the chapel here in Richmond, and we love it. And so that's number one. But then also, as you know, Cheryl and I really do a lot with Share the Love. I'm on the board. I got a board meeting tomorrow night. And I love the fact that I can go on a distribution trip to wherever, and you give somebody a gift of a wheelchair. And the joy and the gratitude that they have is something I can't really describe. You give somebody a gift that they have no possible way to ever pay you back. It's very fulfilling.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
And there are anywhere from little kids to older individuals that have
Right.
crawled around in dirt their entire lives.
Right.
And they have just their lower limbs are either missing or not working or not functional. And their family members are impacted and they have to carry these individuals around, or, there's a community that needs to support them, or maybe there's not. It is incredible to see. So Share the Love is an organization that raises money. It's a charity, a nonprofit that raises money to go on these mission trips to different countries, third world countries, and distribute wheelchairs to people that would never have access to them. And Dealmaker, do you have any idea how much money over the years Dealmaker has raised for?
Tremendous amount.
Hundreds of thousands.
150,000 just last March. So yeah, a lot. Yeah. And that's part of our why for doing it. It's like the spirit of generosity is another core value of Dealmaker.
Right. And
so yeah, it's amazing when you go on these trips. And I remember being in Nicaragua with your dad, and we were in some park, and you have to unbox all the wheelchairs, and then you help people get into them, and they raise their hand, and they give you all these kisses and all this hugs. But then your dad and I were like, oh, we got to go pick up all the boxes. And like, there's no recycle, but throw them away. And there was a group of people that were grabbing the boxes, and we inquired, like, where are you taking the boxes? And they said, we're taking them to our home so we can have a better bed.
Wow.
And I thought, these people, we're so ungrateful in the United States, aren't we? Just focus on being grateful every day. Clean water, a bed to go home to, a comfortable house. And it'll change your mindset forever.
That's a powerful perspective, and that's a great example of how becoming successful and focusing on others and growing a network and helping other people be successful can participate in these things and make a real difference for other people and change other people's lives. That I'm a big fan of Share the Love, and definitely I've kind of just quickly mention to Augie, probably to try to get him on this podcast and have him
great idea.
Talk about his investing background and then how that brought him to Chair the Love and what a difference they're making. But massive respect for Dealmaker for jumping right in and raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for many thousands of wheelchairs for individuals in different communities. And then that spurred off to where I know other meetup groups have then now adopted Chair the Love for their sponsor or their beneficiary of certain events and things like that as well.
Stephen, I look back and I'm like, if I had only focused on myself and just building a huge portfolio only for myself, it would be way bigger than it is right now. But I wouldn't have lived a life, I think, that hit that impact the way that it has. I've got enough. I'm good. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, how much is enough, honestly? At some point, you have to ask yourself that.
I think a lot of people struggle with that.
I do too. I think I've struggled with it. But I'm really happy that I didn't just focus on myself all these years.
So what's next for you? Where do you go from here? You built a powerful network. You're making an impact. You have a wonderful portfolio, beautiful family.
Yeah, thank you.
Where do you go from here?
I don't know. I'm really working with my kids a lot. They're both investing, Melissa and Krissa, in their early 30s. And now my grandkids, my grandson Brooks is 11, and he wanted to work this summer, so he's doing job site visits with me. I've talked to him about flipping a house, and the first thing he said was, how do we turn it upside down? So we got a little work to do there. But he's working with me this summer, and so I just want to keep pouring into my family and to others for as long as I can. I think I'll do it as long as I feel led to do so. I'm just going to keep moving forward.
Awesome. Where can people find more information about you, get in touch with you, get involved with Dealmaker or things like that? I assume we can send them to Dealmaker. They can find out more about Chair the Love there and things like that. What's the best?
Well, for Chair the Love, come to our Facebook group. We have a really fast growing. You've joined it, and what's cool about the Chair the Love Facebook group is we've got people from all over the world now joining and telling their stories. So we have people from Kenya and from Uganda and now Mexico and other places.
Awesome.
Come into there. For Dealmaker, elitedealmakers.com. If you're interested in a meetup, the website's dealmakermeetups.com.
Awesome. So we'll put those in the notes to make sure that people understand where to find you. Any final thoughts?
No, I just think go for it, do it. Don't let somebody else steal your dream. Don't let fear steal your dream. Don't let a failure steal your dream. Don't let something that happened in your past steal your dream. Don't let a crazy neighbor, a non-believing family member, like nothing. Know that Stephen and I believe in you guys, and you can do this. I'm 100% sure of it. I've met people with an 8th grade education that have done extremely well. So I know any of us can do it. There are no excuses. The only excuses are in our mind.
That's
and
correct.
If you have that limitless mindset and an abundance mindset, you can live the life that you've always dreamed of.
Thank you so much, Jim. Keep being an inspiration. You're making an incredible impact, probably way more than you know. I appreciate what work you're doing and the information that you're passing along to future generations. Thank you for being an inspiration, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome. What a great studio. I'm so excited to watch what Peak Property Management does next, and I'm really proud of you, Stephen. You've done a great job.
Thank you, Jim.